Thanks everyone for joining us again today. As you know, if you follow me, I do a couple of these a month. I am John Anderson, thatfranchiseguy.com. And today I'm really excited. I have a couple of folks with me today. We're going to talk about all of the brands together and do some compare and contrast. And I think it's something new that I'm going to try. If it works as well as I think it's going to work, we'll do some more of these. But I have Jerry Jones with me today. He's in charge of the Paramedics brands, heating and air paramedics, as well as the plumbing paramedics, and Frankie Rosario, who's in charge of mold medics. All separate businesses, all separate business opportunities. And so it'll be interesting to compare and contrast those. So, hey, Jerry, since you're on the top of my screen, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself first and tell us a little bit about you?
Absolutely. Thank you for that introduction, John. And it's one little note that I want to add to that introduction is both the heating and air and plumbing paramedics and mold medics are under the same franchisor, Threshold Brands, which has 10 home services under its portfolio. And I think that's important because as you are looking at franchising, whether you expand horizontally or vertically, there's an opportunity there. So I just wanted to share that with you. Jerry Jones here. I live in Waco, Texas. Most will say the birthplace of franchising with Dwyer Group / Neighborly Brands. I did start my franchise career with Neighborly in 2017. I sold Air Serv heating and air conditioning for 5 years. Transitioned in early 2022 to a restoration franchise. I'm a carpenter by trade, and so it was a great fit. I sold 1-800 pack outs for 5-star franchising. And then last September, I heard about Threshold's needs and had an opening for heating and air and plumbing. And I just love the space. I know an extreme amount about it. And we were a perfect fit. I came over in October of last year, and we have thus doubled the amount of owners in our system. So we are a little younger, new to franchising, but the brand's been around for 15 years since 2010 was when it was created, and it launched in 2011. Pleasure to be
Nice.
here.
Yeah, thank you. Now, I'm glad you brought up Threshold too. I meant to include that in my introduction because I think as you pointed out, and clearly through your experience, 40 years ago, there was a particular company in Waco, Texas that launched the service model and service brands and franchising. And now there's probably a dozen different operations. And there's so many advantages to partnering with a franchisor who has that broad-based experience across different lines of service. And so with that, let's talk about the other one we have. Frankie, why don't you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank
Yeah.
you, John. Yeah, my name's Frankie Rosario, and I am based out of Orlando, Florida. Uh, Still relatively new, I guess you could say, to the franchise industry. Started about 4 years ago, 4.5 years ago, but fell in love with it, right? By trade, I mean, I was a owner of a outdoor pressure washing company, and was bought out by a franchise before I knew what franchising was. And so it's kind of funny how the world goes full circle there. But yeah, so started off with a broker network, and so helping and training brokers, right, on how to evaluate a franchise and what's a good opportunity, and what their ideal candidates are, and really helping kind of match make there. And then there was an opportunity, right, not too long ago at Threshold, for Mold, right? Mold Medics is what is the baby brand of the portfolio group. So that opportunity arose for me to take over development, and it's been amazing. It's been incredible working with not only Jerry, our other developers, our entire team, but really the
Yeah.
franchisees make the biggest difference here. And so super excited to really get into it,
Awesome.
and I'll kind of I'll cut things short there. Thank you.
No, I have great information, and you're absolutely welcome to say Franchise Brokers Association on here. That's obviously where we probably first met, and
Absolutely.
I, I've been with FBA now going on 2018. So what is that? 7 years.
seven
For
years.
the record, today is June 3rd, 2025, for the video. Um, and yeah, but so I think I was probably way past any of the training phases by the time you were involved there. But no, good to hear more about mold medics. And so why don't we go back to Jerry and let's talk a little bit about the paramedics and of course touch on both brands because I know that they're similar but different. And just talk a little bit about, the niche that you serve. Obviously, you've got heat and air, you've got plumbing, but it's a little more complicated than that. I'm going to let you tell the story. How did they get founded? How does Threshold operate the model now? All those kind of things. You've got a few minutes, so hit the highlights.
Thank you, John. The information that you had just mentioned, I'm going to try to give the best Cliff Note version in a short amount of time. Our founder story is absolutely phenomenal, but the shortest version I can is heating and air and plumbing paramedics. So our founder is named Brian Carpenter. He's actually out of Indianapolis, Indiana, grew up in Southwest Michigan, and his dad and uncle owned a heating and plumbing business. And he just grew up as a kid and then a gopher and then working the evenings and working weekends and summer jobs in the business. And ultimately, when he graduated high school, he didn't really want to follow in the footsteps of his dad and uncle, but he decided to be a sales representative for a supply house for heating, air conditioning, plumbing, and electrical in Valparaiso. Really did great there. He's a people person, build relationships, relocated in Indianapolis about the time the '08 crash is happening. And they really started putting high emphasis on him increasing more contractors to the supply house versus nurturing the relationships. And he watched his dad and uncle just literally take care of customers, not charge them. Whatever they could pay, they could pay. And, that's his heart and that's his philosophy. And so he created the Paramedics in 2010, launched it in 2011 with a gentleman by the name of Bryce Garrett, who focused on the plumbing side. But coincidentally, Ryan's dad was his first technician. His mom was the customer service representative. And they launched in Indianapolis in May of 2011 and really ran year one was a seven-figure business because of the footprint that he had created since '08 of being in Indianapolis, hearing what the contractors were doing good and what they weren't doing good, and really focused on that people first mentality, not chasing the dollar bills. And that's really who our culture is. Plumbing and heating and air paramedics. One of the things that you'll understand is every building in America has a combination of electrical, plumbing, and heating and air conditioning. We want hot water. We want our home and our businesses to be 74 degrees year round. So when you look at all the different home services, there are some that are nice to have, and there are some that are absolutely have to have. And heating and air conditioning and plumbing are those. So there's a phenomenal opportunity. It's nothing is recession resistant, but we're probably as close as it can get to that. And so there's always going to be a need. And I think that if you're looking to come into home services, you need to be thinking about, do you have that servant heart? Because when our phone rings, something dramatically is going wrong. And they're
Mhm.
fearful of what it's going to cost them. Are they going to be taken advantage of? Are they going to be overcharged? And that's really where we want to be good stewards in the people that we are awarding these opportunities to. And that I'm sure will lead up to some of the ideal candidate things, but an absolute necessity of services. And we'll certainly talk a little bit later about licensing and some other things, but that's
Yeah.
the short version of it,
Well,
my
no,
friend.
I appreciate the, trying to keep it brief. My takeaway out of that, and I think that it's important to make sure people understand is how that translates to franchisee candidates and ultimately becoming franchisees. The approach he takes or took and Threshold now in terms of conveying that same attitude to because essentially franchisees are your customer, right?
100%. And good point, John. When you think about what Ryan did and what Ryan built, is he put the team and people first. His
Mm,
philosophy was if I can build the right people, get the right people, build the right team, then that team of mine is going to go out into the community and provide that top-notch service
yeah,
and take care of the end customer. And if we really work it from that perspective, then you're going to be a phenomenal business because you're going to turn out to be the not only reputable but verifiable, honest person for HVAC, honest person for plumbing, because you're going to put the customer's needs first before the business's needs. And unfortunately, not all businesses are built equal. Not all franchises are built equal. And we
right.
can certainly we'll talk about some of our differences, but that's where it really has to start. If you're thinking of looking at a franchise business because you want a widget and it's all about the EBITDA number, home service is not for you.
Yeah. No,
Because it is a different roller coaster of a business.
you got to care about people, both your employees and your customers, of course, and
100%.
so I think that. But one thing that does often get lost in somebody who's thinking about this is that how does the franchisor treat them as a partner or franchisee after they get through this upfront, place where we make everything look really good? How does it really happen once it, and of course, it all comes out in validation, so you've got to, be transparent about it. But um, I did want to touch on that point. And last point of clarification before I move over to Frankie for a minute. These are two distinctly different franchises, correct? You're not
Mhm.
getting both when you sign up for the
Correct.
paramedics. You are either heat and air or plumbing, or I imagine you can do both, but they are separate franchise fees, correct?
They are. Thank you
Yeah,
for that
yeah,
point, John. They are 100% two different franchises. You can certainly stack them on one territory. I have a couple of people that are doing that.
yeah.
Plumbing and heating and air conditioning go hand in hand, folks. A plumber can work on a water heater. An HVAC person can work on a water heater because there's a heating element. It's heating. So, depending on what you have going on, there are shared services. You get into the New England states, plumbers are working, doing plumbing, actual real plumbing water jobs during the summer, but they turn into HVAC people on boilers in the winter. So there is a shared service. You mentioned, how does a franchisor? Not all franchisors are in one or the same category business.
Yeah,
Here at Threshold, we are only in-home services. So we are allowed to take shared services, whether that's marketing, whether that's recruiting, whether that's purchasing, whether that's buying power, whether that's compliance training or whatever it may be. And we have a shared service system that supports all 450 plus franchisees across our 10 platforms. So I think there's a uniqueness there that sometimes gets missed
yeah.
when people are looking at franchising. It's because they don't want to be in business for by themselves. They're in business for themselves, but
Right.
they don't want to be in business by themselves. And that's where the franchise really gets to elevate and help out the franchisees during struggling times and or celebrating
Yeah.
the wins with them.
And and actually maybe this would be a good segue over to Frankie, and you can answer this, and then let's talk about what exactly. I mean, mold medics. I hear the name, and I think of a lot of things that could be. So I want to certainly, you know, HVAC or plumbing is everybody gets it, but I definitely want. So, but one of those shared services, I believe you guys offer a call center too, correct?
Correct. Oh,
Yeah.
so not for mold medics,
No?
and it's not
Okay.
necessarily a call center. No. So
Okay.
we help support, I mean, in different aspects, and this is going to go kind of segue into one of our differentiators, right? Which
Yeah.
is our ability, our people support, right? It's one of our bigger benefits, right? Is the fact that you have an expert in marketing, you have an expert in operations, you have an expert in training, you have an expert in onboarding. So again, you're getting multiple points of touch points or points of contact throughout your journey with us, but they're experts in their market, right? We're not just John is the guy for franchising and he knows
Right.
everything about franchising, right? You may know a lot about one specific industry, right? Let's say you're a real
Yeah.
estate, right? You're coming from real estate, you know a lot about real estate. Well, great. I want to talk to John. But if I've got, heating and air conditioning problems, I'm going to call Jerry, and Jerry's
Right.
going to be my point of contact. And so that's kind of what, that's our main, one of our main differentiators is that we've got somebody who's going to be supporting you on the front end with onboarding and getting your licenses and making sure you've got your vehicle and your equipment
Yeah.
and your supplies, right? And all that. And hey, we're going to help even encourage, who the ideal candidate is in terms of technicians, right? In this instance, right? Who our ideal techs are and what their background should be, right? So we're not going to do the hiring for you, but we're going to, line you up
So
for success with that.
yeah, and so mold medics, the niche that you focus on or your franchisees do is basically it's indoor air quality, right? It's
Correct.
something that, hey,
Mhm.
you know, you may not even know you have a problem. So marketing to me is really important in that area. It's got to be consumer education, right? It's got to be awareness that, hey, let us come in and check your house and help you identify problems. So talk a little bit about
Absolutely.
what exactly your franchise do day to day in that business.
Yeah, absolutely. So we were founded in 2018 by Tim Schwackhammer. And so Tim's been phenomenal in creating this awareness, right? Because you've got your restoration companies that handle mold remediation in a very small aspect. Again, they're going after bigger jobs, insurance, disasters, right? So the residential community is kind of left to, hanging unless there's, some sort of tragic, accident or weather,
Yeah.
incident that comes by. But what Tim did was educate, the common, residential household of the issue, right? More than 70% of homes in the United States have mold, right? And so in some form, whether that be behind your water heater, under your shower, in your, pantry, under your fridge, in your dishwasher, there's mold in all kinds of forms, and people don't understand the impact that that has on their health until they go to the doctor, right? And go, hey, I haven't been feeling well, and then they end up coming back with, a positive test for mold infestation in their home, and now we've got to get it remediated. And so
Yeah.
whether it's a new build, whether it's a pre-built, right? It's already been established. One of our key components that separates us is that we focus only on mold, right? And indoor air quality. So through air duct cleaning and dry vent cleaning, those are some added services. But again, mold, that doing the testing and doing the remediation of helping those really live a healthier life.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously the restoration companies are, and I've just learned this from presenting them as options. They're rarely called out for mold. It's usually water leaks or water damage, and then they find the mold.
Correct.
Um, so to me, this is yeah, it's an opportunity that's more about helping people identify there's a problem and a solution to that problem and live in a healthier life. So
I'd
Absolutely.
like
yeah,
to
And
add, I'd like to add to that if I can.
sure, yeah,
So real quick, one of the processes with paramedic heating and air paramedics is when the technician shows up, one of the first things he does is set the air analysis device on the countertop in the kitchen or in the living room, because it's usually the front half of the house is the biggest part of the house. And while he's going through his diagnostics, after about 15 minutes, it gives a report to that technician. That technician emails it to the homeowner or the business owner, and it will actually tell you how much moisture. If you have over a certain percentage of moisture, I think it's 18% moisture, that is a hotbed for potential mold growth, right? It's going to settle in areas that don't have good flow, behind couches, like he said, behind dishwashers, under refrigerators. There's a lot of different areas that can create some form of moisture, and because you don't see physical water, you don't think about there's an infestation problem.
Mhm.
So just knowing that indoor air quality, knowing what the air and what the quality of the air you're breathing from all aspects, from dust,
hmm
dander, pollens, carbon monoxide, moisture, and then of course it will detect mold if mold is physically in the air, because it's taking it and lifting it off of whatever surface it was attached to, and now it's become airborne.
yeah,
And so it's really a great thing that I'm so glad you pointed on that, because COVID put the quality in which in the air and the water that we're putting in our bodies is was important. And so indoor air quality really skyrocketed in 2020, and it's
yeah.
a lot of opportunities.
Well, and you mentioned venting, and I think that's something that people maybe are, conceptually anyway, it makes more sense. But what doesn't necessarily come to mind is, what's behind that drywall, underneath your floorboards, behind the dishwasher, things that you don't see every day. You don't smell it most of the time. I mean, you might get a little moldy smell and that might generate a phone call, but I think a lot of times that stuff's there for a long time before people realize there's an issue. Yeah.
Absolutely. And also you look at perishables, right? Like now, nowadays, and I'll be candid in this, right? Sometimes, when your pantry, right? You may not even know that there's mold in your pantry, but your bread's going bad after 2 days,
Yeah.
right? Or your fruits are going bad. And you're going, what the heck? I just bought these the other day,
Right.
There's a real problem. Right? So like the wheels start turning. And again, and mold is kind of just the embedment, right? That's our first way of getting in the home and helping, right? Is improve their air quality and remediating mold, which again can have unfortunately catastrophic, effects on the body, but also, with our air duct cleaning, with our dryer vent cleaning, with, our disinfection, again, we want to remediate and we want to keep that mold away, right?
Yeah.
Compared to your typical, right, restoration company, they're going to come in, rip things out and replace them, right? There's no real remediation of the mold. So yeah, you put new drywall, yeah, you put new flooring, but again, in due time, if you never curate or fix what the problem is, it's going to come back.
Right.
And so, we're just helping educate those on that and say, hey, listen, yeah, there is a better way of doing this so that it's not going to cost you tens of thousands of dollars for you to go through your insurance to do
Yeah.
this time and time again.
So I love that. Let's and let's just keep rolling with Frankie for a minute, and then Jerry, will flip back to you for the same feedback on the Paramedics brands. But so let's shift the focus now from maybe from the consumer to somebody who's thinking, I'd like to get into business for myself.
Absolutely.
I've found franchising. That's how I did it. I'm like, I don't have a better mousetrap. I don't know anything that I want to do. I was a mortgage banker at the time. I don't want to do that anymore. So, where can I plug into a system and build a business with somebody else kind of guiding me? And franchising is perfect for that, as you guys know. Um, but why would Mold Medics be a great opportunity for somebody who's just they're in that mindset? They really don't know what they don't know yet. They haven't explored, but they're considering options. There should be some of those people watching this today.
Absolutely. And I think the number one thing is the mold space is just an underserved industry
Mhm.
as a whole. There's very little competition, especially in the franchise space. It's only one other mold remediation company. And so when you're looking at a franchise, you look at cleaning companies, you look at HVAC companies, you look at, restoration companies, they're very saturated, right? You have 10 to 15 different options wherever you go. When you come to the mold side, there's not that many,
Yeah,
right? And so when you look at a brand that's not only backed by, Threshold and a development group that has these systems and processes and support in place for you, but now you're in a high demand industry with very little competition. Those two things I think really appeal to someone who's interested in becoming a business owner, right? Because you want to get into a space where there is demand and the demand is definitely there. And it
yeah,
comes in a variety of ways, right? You touched on it, a phone call, a smell, you notice a water spot on your wall,
yeah.
but also through like strategic referral partnerships, working with realtors, property managers, home inspectors, holistic doctors as well that kind of can diagnose some of these, mold, um, these mold, how do I say this, health,
You're you're
I don't
pr-
know how to,
you're probably partnering with HVAC paramedics and plumbing
correct.
paramedics too, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. So the things that cause health things, and again, the referral sources come from a very, from
Yeah,
far and wide. Again, because again, the mold is just an underserved or under duress industry that there's just not enough out there. Or there's not enough companies treating it and taking care of it. It's why,
yeah.
the majority of homes have it. So again, you're
So
joining into an industry that's growing, and the demand is there.
so a business that really helps people, that is in demand, that doesn't have a ton of competition, and yeah, we'll get into in a minute, of course,
Finances and all that.
but not a doesn't cost an arm and a leg to get started. So
Correct.
yeah, that's really a great opportunity. Jerry, talk about the paramedics with the same idea. Why would somebody who's thought about franchising and all they know is Jimmy John's or Dunkin' Donuts, why plumbing or heat and air?
Well, I'm going to give you the top three reasons because one of the first questions I always ask is why are we talking, right?
Hmm.
Because I think that's relevant and important. The first one is the obvious one. When all the brick and mortar offices, franchise businesses, gyms, Java juices were shuttered for a short or a long period of time, depending on where you're at geographically, everybody made a transition to working from home. The home services shot up 65% in 2020, 2021. And those that were furloughed from their office space and were working at home, they started thinking about, well, if this were to happen again, what would I get into? So, home services is at 100%. So much so that private equity is transitioning out of brick and mortar and retail to
Yeah,
home services. Second reason, specifically candidates, either to Frankie's point, they experience something. Man, my kid overflowed the tub. I had to get a plumber out, and it cost me $1,300. Or my air conditioner went out in August, and after 6 days, they finally sent somebody out, and they tried to say I needed a $10,000 system, or I upgraded my system, and it was $7,000. And oh my gosh, you have to have heat, you have to have air conditioning, and I just saw the large ticket number, and of course, we peel back on that. So the general consensus is it's not going away,
right.
right? Every building needs the building to be 74 degrees. Restaurants, hair salons, nail salons, doctor's offices, any office space, any place where a customer would congregate for 30 minutes or longer, you want that area to be room temperature, 74 degrees, right? So the need from the plumbing's perspective, how many of us had a mischievous kid or grandkid continually to flush foreign objects down toilets? How many times do we have
Yeah.
drain issues? The only time I messed up plumbing in my home was I couldn't get a hose off of a hose bib, and I did crack the line inside the wall of a brick, and we have a brick home on the outside. And of course, I brought somebody in. But my point is there are so many things that are going on that if you have flowing water in your home because you hung up a new picture in the hallway and ran into a water line, and now water's leaking everywhere, if you don't stop that sooner, then again, mold's going to come into play, demolition's going to come into play, remodeling is going to come into play. There's so many things that could fester. So I think a lot of the commonality here is most of the candidates I talk to have experienced it and or have had somebody in their immediate circle experience it. Unfortunately, sometimes from the bad health side, and sometimes from it just cost me an arm and a leg to replace my system.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where a lot of the awareness and then COVID, those would be my top answers to you. Um, what I try to drill down, and it doesn't matter what home service you are, people went into a career because they found out they were good at it, they had a knack at it, or they just clicked with it. If you don't love what you do, if you don't love the business you own, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
You have to be passionate to get up every day, to go through that grind, to go through the complaints, to go through the headaches, to go through the employee issues, to go through all those things. And at the end of the day, say, I wouldn't change it for the world.
Yeah.
And that's where I think when you're looking at an ideal candidate, when you're looking at what businesses you want to get into, you got to be passionate about it. Don't be looking at this from how much money can I make? Okay. If that's the case, go spend the 1.7 million and get a McDonald's and Golden Arches, and you'll have money flowing out of your house. So I think those are some of the key takeaways. But most people have experienced it,
Yeah.
saw it, and saw what it costs, and said, "Hey, I want to get into that industry."
Yeah. I think that, it's something that I don't know. I take a little bit of the other side of the fence on that one in terms of so many of the best businesses out there, like all three of these, are not things that people might necessarily have that passion for, right? You're not going to your cocktail
Mhm.
parties or out on the golf course with your buddies talking about how exciting this business is that you've built in plumbing or mold remediation.
It's
And
definitely not sexy, John. It's definitely
Not
not
a sexy
sexy.
but
gig.
If you
but
go
what
climb in your attic right now and tell me how sexy it is
right.
after 30 minutes of being in that attic in Texas, okay? It's going to be 94 degrees today. Or in
But
the backyard in the
that's
snow,
right.
right? It's not
But
sexy.
but I do think where the passion comes in is when you look at these types of businesses and what you do every day, it's people and relationships and you're like and I mean that in ways way broader than the average person watching this right now is even prepared to think about. We talked about in the beginning, how does that franchisor treat you? Those relationships are very, very important and ability to manage those relationships on both sides. Employee relationships. I mean, I got into franchising and starting my own business, not necessarily for the money, but for the lifestyle. And most people I talk to, that's a primary goal. If you want to leverage other people and get your business up to a point in a couple years where you can come and go and go out on the boat or go out on the golf course or take your vacations because you have a great team running it for you, that's people. And then of course it's the customer relationships where, you have to treat them right and you have to coach your people on how to treat them right. All of those things together are something that I get excited about, and really get passionate about. And I think that what you look at as the vehicle is what's the best fit of these brands or any brand out there for those people to accomplish those goals. And so that's where, we try to get I try to help people get to with decisions on franchises they want to look at. So maybe just to kind of keep going, Jerry, for a second, talk a little bit about who, if there is an ideal profile, who is that person that might be interested in the Paramedics brands, and why maybe they would look at the Paramedics versus you said you work for a couple others. I won't mention other brand names here, but
I
across the industry, why you
Yeah, I
guys?
appreciate that, John. And I'm going to keep this answer as short as possible so Frankie can have time for his. But there is some truth to managerial, logistical, business, P&L, military. A lot of these individuals bring great characteristics to the table. The great
Mhm.
thing about franchising, number one, you don't have to be from the industry. What do I mean? I don't need to be a doctor to own urgent care. My first employee needs to be a doctor. Otherwise, why am I filling a waiting room full of sick people? Okay. So that's number one. The other ideal piece is I want to go a little further. I'm looking for grit. I'm looking for tenacity. I'm looking for financially secure people. The number one of the top reasons businesses fail, they run out of money before they get cash flowing. So if you're coming on a shoestring budget, we're going to look at that. I want you to be community oriented.
Mhm.
I want you to be so proud of the business that you own that you are always wearing a branded shirt. You are always driving your personal vehicle and it's been wrapped with your brand. You are always recruiting. You are going to farmers markets. You're with the Chamber of Commerce. You're going to other BNI groups within your community. You have to make a presence within your community because it's your community, you're serving, but
Yeah.
it's your community on who you're employing.
Yeah.
And finally, when it comes to talking about how do I fill that vehicle up with the right team members, the number one place that you create future employees is within your existing employees. If your existing employees are not telling their mom, their dad, their uncle, their brother, their sister, their cousin, their brother, their buddies on the golf course about how awesome you are because you're given spiffs on maintenance agreements and you made $385 in cash money last week on spiffs.
Yeah.
There's so many ways that our franchisees build a culture within their organization so that those employees are doing above and beyond, number
Yeah.
one, right? Not the bare minimum, but above and beyond. And then they're going out and recruiting on your behalf. That's what we're looking for. Having that passion, being able to be present in your community, sponsoring little league teams, being
Yeah.
proud to see your brand out there. That's what we're looking for. There's a lot of very, very well financial people
Yeah.
that are a horrible fit for
Well,
home services franchising.
yeah. And so just to clarify 2 points real quickly, and then we'll touch over to Frankie. Um, so it sounds like a lot of being the face of the business, right?
Initially.
Yeah, and that's well, and literally as an owner, you always should be that, right? But what I didn't hear is that they need a sales aptitude, right?
They don't.
You're going into people's homes, or your people are, but you don't need to be a salesperson or have a sales background. You just got to have that enthusiasm, right?
Yeah, and the reason I didn't hone in on any particular category, yes, I love it when people come to me from sales or from marketing or from managerial because those are some boxes that are important in business.
Yeah,
But if my obviously sales, my background and my strengths are A, I'm a tradesperson. B, I'm actually pretty good at sales.
yeah,
I want to be out with my team. I want to be in front of the consumer. But if that is my strong point, I will be honest. I hate paperwork. I hate P&Ls. I hate budgets. I hate reports. My wife thrives at that.
right.
So I'm going to hire somebody to do the things I'm not good at. I'm going to hire the person that is the great tech or the installer or the salesperson. We bring the marketing to you. So,
Yeah,
but the great thing is about Threshold and about most franchisors, not all, but most,
right.
they really do have a great training program
Yeah,
where they can elevate their skills in managerial if they're weak there, or they can elevate their sales, they can elevate their business acumen. So no, I don't put a particular trade ahead of any other because everything else can be taught, recruited, and backfilled.
perfect. And while we're talking about hiring, at least for your two brands, some states, if not all, maybe most states require some sort of license to be in the HVAC industry or the plumbing industry, correct?
Yeah.
How do you handle that so that your franchisees don't have to worry about trying to get, a license or even a GC license while they're trying to open a business?
Well, they wouldn't be able to get one.
Right.
Well, it takes 3 years for a master plumber, and it takes 4 years minimum for HVAC. And being an owner of a plumbing franchise and or an franchise or business, we'll give you that threshold real quick, and we will actually train the franchisee on basic HVAC. They will be able to identify a capacitor. They'll be able to understand
Right.
how to do a camera drain inspection. They will be able to know how to do basic repairs. But I don't want them being out. I don't want them to be a plumber or a technician for HVAC.
Right.
I want them working on their business. So what you're going to do is you're looking to hire your first person would be, like I said, the urgent care. I buy an urgent care, I need to go get a good medical doctor.
Right.
So you're going to need to go and find an A or a B rated technician, plumber
Yep.
technician, or HVAC technician that has a license. Maybe they tried to go out on their own. COVID shut them down, or maybe they just couldn't scale it because all they knew was plumbing. They didn't know business.
Yep.
And there's a lot of people out there that are going to be plumbers for the rest of their life because their last name doesn't match the person they're working for. So they're looking, you're going to need a general manager for your plumbing and
Yeah.
HVAC division when you get your second and third technician. So you can bring somebody in as a licensed plumber or HVAC technician today, but now they have a general manager's role within the first year and
Yeah.
they're running that division. And so there's opportunity through elevation. Absolute worst case, if they don't have the contacts within their inner circle, but generally speaking, most people I talk to knows somebody that
Sure.
knows a plumber or knows an HVAC person. And I usually tell them to start there. But
Yeah.
we do have two paid recruiting companies that they could actually pay. That recruiting company will go and find the licensed candidates and bring them to the franchisee, and the franchisee will then interview, hire, and on.
Awesome.
Yeah,
That's even a lot more thorough than I expected. So the main point I just wanted to get across was if you're watching this and you think, wow, it'd be great to operate a an air conditioning or a heating company, but I don't, what am I? I'm not licensed. You know that there's a solution. So
there is a solution.
yeah, Frankie, how about mold medics? Same kind of thought process. Ideal candidate. What is it? What are you looking for, and what kind of things are they doing day to day?
Yeah. I mean, I could mimic pretty much. I mean, Jerry hit it right on the nose. Grit. I mean, we're a young brand. Again, we're both, we both represent these younger brands, but they've got so much potential behind them. And I'd say I'd like to break it down into really one word. So, and it's the one word I like to use is pioneer, right? When you're early on in a franchise system, you are a pioneer franchisee. You are a partner. You are more than just another location, right? Like we're really looking for partners, for pioneer franchisees who are willing to get their hands dirty to essentially you won't necessarily have to be doing the remediation or the
Right.
area cleaning or but hey, listen, we're young, and are you willing to take that step? Right? Hey, the system isn't really the best. Can we, this is what my issues are. Let's address those. Let's improve them. Right? Having that kind of grit to be able to really partner with us, to really optimize the business, right? Because again, I do represent MadePro as well, so I'll give them an honorable shout out. But again, like with my MadePro franchise, the CRM system was built by the franchisees. And so
Yeah.
that's what we're kind of looking for, right? Is looking at these systems and processes and how can we optimize and make your business more efficient through your direct input because you're living this day-to-day lifestyle. And
Yeah.
so, what a day-to-day typically again, we don't require a brick and mortar, an office or a warehouse. And so you can literally operate this out of your home.
Yeah.
Having your technicians on par, we'll talk about licensing now. If you're not in California, Florida, Texas, New York, or Louisiana, it is pretty easy to get a general mold remediation license. It is a matter of good doing a state certified training. It's about a
Mhm.
week long. And again, they don't typically look for like backgrounds, a degree, relevant experience, right? Like they do in, for instance, Florida. Florida, you need a microbiology degree. So it's like, so
Well,
it's a little easier, as long as you're not in those states. But if you have relevant experience, and again, they leave that very
yeah.
vague and open to, for interpretation.
So
Relevant
one of
experience.
those states you mentioned, then you would follow the model of the paramedics brands, right, and hire somebody. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well,
Um,
and I noticed when you mentioned get your hands dirty, I know that's more of an analogy than real because obviously what you're looking for is people to build a team, build a business, not to be out doing remediation jobs. But
correct.
um, and so I just want to make that clear for anybody who's watching. It's get your hands dirty, meaning you're buying a business, you're starting a business, you got to roll up your sleeves and you got to get up every morning with the attitude, I'm going to do whatever it takes to be successful today. And
Absolutely.
and that's I don't care what franchise you get into or what business you're starting. If you have that attitude and you're properly capitalized, you know, and you've got a, you know, the good business plan with the good partners, it's going to work for you. You'll be successful with it. So, um, you know, I think that's great. So you know, this has been awesome. For those of you watching, I do not, I typically try not to go quite this long, but having, you know, three different brands covered, there's just so much to talk about, and we've only you know, tip of the iceberg kind of a thing. So, I'm going to have you guys, you know, wrap up and you know, just touch on, you know, what does it take to get started? How do, you know, getting the proper capital, how do people typically do that? Anything that really is important for this kind of introduction that we didn't cover, throw that in there, and then we'll wrap this up, you know, with that. So, Jerry, why don't you go ahead and
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to tell you just about no matter where you're at in the United States, the range is going to be roughly 250 grand. There are a few states that might be a little higher than that, but I think 250,000, that includes the franchise fee, that includes payroll, that includes marketing, onboarding, all those expenses, folks. We allow semi-absentee only if the partner that's running the day-to-day has ownership of the franchise agreement in the LLC, whether that's 80/20, 90/10, but we will not allow semi-absentee if the person that's running the show is not going to have ownership. Heating and air, four positions. So whatever the franchisee, what position they can fill of the four, they're going to need three employees plus themselves. On the plumbing side, it's two. Okay. So two distinct employees, and then the owner's going to oversee the business. We also allow for up to the first year or so, because it can go a little longer, remote. You don't need brick and mortar to start with us. You
uh,
can operate from your home. So that is an expense that is much lower than others. That's why it's around that 250,000. But that's the path we're looking for.
and plumbing and heat and air both are going to be around 250?
Yeah, that's a
Okay.
great budgeted
Yeah.
number. Depending on where you're at in plumbing, I can probably get you down across the finish line at 200 South and Midwest states, but East and West Coast 250 on plumbing. And then HVAC is going to be a solid 250 no matter where
Yeah.
you're at. New England states, Pacific Northwest, I might ask for three just because the real estates when those times come and just the taxes,
And
the red tape that
yeah,
you have in those areas.
for those of you out there who are watching this thing, oh gosh, I don't have 250 burning a hole in my pocket. You guys have good experience with the SBA and other lending arrangements?
Yeah, so SBA's really tightened their belt since Doge. So what I
Yeah.
would tell you is what I'm seeing, and Frankie can comment on this, is we're seeing a lot of utilization of their 401ks with a rollover business startup. You're not penalized. It's a great way to take your own money, reinvest it into the business, but you also get to pay yourself back. It also creates a retirement account within your own business.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a big increase in HELOCs right now. Interest rates are still kind of high with mortgages. This is not a seller's market necessarily. And so a lot of people are sitting on a lot of equity and there's an opportunity there. So we're really
Yeah.
seeing a shift with 401ks, cash savings, HELOCs, and then there's still some SBAs out there. And a lot of people are relying on just the bare minimum SBA, which is that 150 Express.
Right.
More favorable terms, easy turnaround on that. But those are the typicals. And we have 4 to 6 vendors that we can share with, no different than what you offer candidates. And
Sure.
so I generally try to get the pre-funding into candidates' hands earlier in the process so they know what they're pre-approved for, so they can really hone in on whatever the business opportunity they're looking for is.
Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah, and
Frankie, how?
I'll piggyback off of Jerry as
Yeah.
well. Another thing that's been a priority is I want to say the majority, if not all, of Threshold brands are on the SBA pre-approved list.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And so when you go to look at a business, that's another big thing, right? There's the SBA is going to look at how viable, how long. Look at the history of the brand. Look at their FDDs and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
it's a little easier, when you're already on that list. So all of our brands are, and I would say for mold, what I'm seeing, I mean, we've got a range, but I'd say a healthy number to anticipate is about 170. Biggest thing is going to be your truck and your equipment.
Yeah.
Because again, we're going to require, a Ram Pro Master, much like Jerry has in his background, right? A Pro Master, a Ford Transit, your wrap, and then again, your equipment, because you are doing more than just mold remediation. I don't want people to think of mold and that's all you're encompassed by. We do have reoccurring, revenue models with, air duct cleaning and dryer vent cleaning, disinfection, right? Crawl space encapsulation. dust control. I mean, there's so many that the list goes on and on, but
Yeah.
um, there's more to the business than just mold. So again, prepare yourself for about $180,000. That's going to give you more than enough working capital. And at onset, really one truck, one technician. So the owner or franchisee themselves will be essentially running the operation, and they'll hire a technician to go do the work
Love it.
outside. So again, home base, no office, warehouse, limited inventory required because the majority of it, again, even with your disinfection, um, with your disinfection revenue stream,
Yeah.
it comes in, they come in like, think of it as like chlorinated packs, essentially, and you dissolve them in water, 2-to-1 solution. So again, takes up no space and they don't go bad. So very limited in the space of inventory.
Love it. Guys,
I
this
want
has
to
been awesome. And uh, Jerry, I heard you. So I did just want to touch on that SBA thing. As of Monday, there actually is an SBA registry again, where for 5 or 6 years or more, there has not been one. So, um, and that information is slowly leaking out into the public, and a lot of people may not even know what that means. But to get funded with a franchise, your brand actually has to be
Registered. Yes.
pre-registered on the SBA.
Correct.
And then that 150 loan program, Jerry, you mentioned, is pretty, but again, all this is fluid, right? The Doge thing, the current administration, pro, con, whatever, I'm not going there, but um, it has caused a lot of things to come and go and scared and all this stuff with anything related to government. So, but it does still exist. 150,000, as little maybe as 10% cash and equity infusion. You do need to establish reserves on top of that. So it isn't necessarily 10% down, but it could be if you've got the right reserves. So, Jerry, did you have something you wanted to add
I
there?
was just going to add one final
Yep.
thing. When it comes to most franchises, they have what are called protected territories.
Yeah.
Most franchise territories are based on population. Here at the Paramedics brands, we don't put stock in people, meaning a 10-year-old's not a customer. So we last year changed our territorial boundary to single family houses. Our territories are comprised of 100 to 120,000 single family homes. Why is that important? My average territory is 400 to 500,000 people, 3 to 5 times bigger than any competition out there.
Yeah.
So, and I believe Frankie's are the same way. So much larger territories for one investment, and they are protected.
Yeah.
Nobody can come into your territory, market, and poach your customers. So that's where I wanted
Well,
to close.
no, I'm glad you did because it's another one of those things that is not commonly known with franchise candidates or even really talked about, but at some point towards the end, it becomes very apparent. And what many franchises do um, is their territories might be 100,000 people,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they go, well, but our average franchisee does 3 to 5 territories. Well, now,
There you go.
your franchise fee, instead of, I don't know, what are you guys at, 40 or 50 grand, something like that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
40.
40. So
50,000.
yeah.
Now they're having to spend 140
Right.
or
Yeah, you've got to
120.
spend 3 times
Exactly.
that for the same territory. So it's a really big deal when you start thinking about where do I want this business to be in 5 or 10 years, and how many people, homes, square footage, square mileage do I need to service to get there? And that's part of what I guide people through as we're trying to figure out where we want to go is, you got to have that destination on the roadmap, and if you can get there for 250 instead of 350 or four, that's a big deal. So,
And I want to close with almost every business in America strives to capture 5 to 8% of market share.
yeah,
That's it, folks. Chevrolet, Ford, they own 6% of the market. So when you think about 120,000 homes and you can capture 8% of that,
yeah,
that's that's 5,000 homes. How long would it take you to go into 5,000 houses when you have only 4 appointments a day?
right.
So, when you really break it down like that, 5 to 8% market share seems low, but it's not. And so many people have these concerns. I know we're running late, but so many people have concerns about saturation.
Yeah,
And the self-employed people are not competition. right? And so just keep that in mind as well, that there's so much market share out there, and you could never touch every building in any given territory. Not for You couldn't do it. The world's largest, well, not one of the world's largest, but one of the largest residential HVAC companies is called Parker and Sons. If any of you will Google them, they're in Houston. I mean, they're in Phoenix, Arizona. They do about 80 million annually, only in residential, and they're in 7% of Phoenix.
It's amazing. Yeah, amazing.
So
Well, guys, I definitely appreciate this. This has been fantastic. And yeah, we did go a little bit long, but I think the information was worth it. So, anybody who's watched all the way to the end, we definitely appreciate you. I certainly do for those of you who watch these and are going through my library watching it, whether it's